Happy Saturday. So this morning, I'm gonna get into anger, the state of consciousness as anger, and just a reminder: these are not just fleeting emotions. But they're states of consciousness. So the energy level of anger is 150 hertz. So anger can lead to either constructive or destructive action. As people move out of apathy and grief to overcome fear as a way of life, which we covered, they begin to want. Desire leads to frustration that in turn leads to anger. Thus, anger can be a fulcrum by which the oppressed are eventually catapulted to freedom. Anger over social injustice, victimization, and inequality has energized great movements that have led to major changes in the structure of society. You can kind of sense that brewing in society today with all the corruption that's being exposed, the intentional belligerent statements by our current president that can trigger people to anger. Note that it was the movements and not the anger itself that brought about constructive benefits. Anger, however, expresses itself most often as resentment or as a lifestyle that is exemplified by irritable, explosive people who are oversensitive to slights and become injustice collectors, as well as quarrelsome, contentious, belligerent, and litigious. Anger that stems from frustrated want is based on the energy field below it, desire. Frustration results from exaggerating the importance of desires. The angry person may, like the frustrated infant, go into a rage. Anger easily leads to hatred, which has an erosive effect on all areas of a person's life. Anger as an emotion is prevalent throughout society as a transient reaction, but anger as a level of consciousness is indicative of dominance by a pervasive negative energy field that is reflective of the ego's distorted perceptions. And there's the difference. Anger as an emotion, but anger as a level of consciousness. It's the dominance of a pervasive energy field. A primary aspect of the distortion is a narcissistically oriented worldview and expectations that the world should cater and conform to one's wishes and perceptions. Inasmuch as the world is not centered or concerned with a specific individual per se, the result is chronic frustration and resentment. The narcissistic ego is competitive and prone to feel slighted and insulted with even minimal provocation, as the core of the ego sees itself as sovereignty that expects priority and agreement or compliance with its expectations, as well as satisfaction of its wants and proclivities. So like I said before, on the scale of the map of consciousness, I don't know if you can see that very well, but this chart doesn't see it, but these are all these calibrations below 200 are ego based. They're all based on the ego. Shame at 20, guilt/hate. And remember that about guilt, that people with guilt tend to project hatred toward others. That's why that section is guilt/hate, because you project your guilt by your hatred of others. Apathy at 50, grief at 75, fear at 100, desire at 125, and I'm at anger at 150, and pride, which is 175. And these are all ego based. And ego in itself isn't bad or evil. It is your ego is your survival mechanism. As it says, it explains it somewhere here. Yeah, it says life up to consciousness level 200. 200 is courage. That's where you start moving your way out of the grunge of ego. Life up to consciousness level 200 is therefore strongly rivalrous and self-interested because it sees others as potential enemies. In modern languaging, it would be called possessive, competitive, hostile, and in extreme expressions, aggressive and savage. At consciousness level 200, there is a shift to the more benign. That is, in addition to the carnivore, there emerges the herbivore. From consciousness level 200 up, the nature of life becomes more harmonious. So the ego structure is dualistic and splits the unity of reality into contrasting pairs and seeming opposites that are therefore the product and content of perception, which consists of projections. So, yeah, I've always heard, if you want to change your mind, change your perception. Your perception of things, of life, is everything. And consciousness levels below 200 are dualistic, like this and that. Everything is dualistic. And society, entertainment and society just promotes that. We all know that. Politically, sports, this person versus that person, it keeps people divided. This is a basic defect of the mind, as noted by Descartes, René Descartes, the philosopher, who clarified that the mind confuses its own mentations with the external reality of nature as it is. This basic defect is covered extensively in section 1 of Truth versus Falsehood. That's another book by David Hawkins that I'll probably be getting eventually. The personal self is therefore operationally a victim of its own projected dualistic perceptions. Below calibration level 200, this is a prevailing limitation in which the mind is unable to differentiate between its emotionalized perceptions or opinions, in parentheses, in the external world as it actually is. This impairment affects 78% of the world's population and 49% of America's population. And that was, when was this book written? That was in 2000. That was as of 2006. And that's like, okay, that's another thing about these writings, is that these have been around. These have been around for a while. His research, I think Power versus Force, David Hawkins actually wrote the first book in 1995, which is amazing. And then this was written 2006. And I just recently purchased a book written by his wife, because he passed away in 2012, called Explaining the Map of Consciousness Explained. And a lot of I would say in my journey of transcendentalism, I mean, the research of David Hawkins has a lot to do with psychology and the ego, which to me is vital. It's vital to understanding who you are. Like the philosophers said, know thyself. It's vital to that. But there's also nature. So I'm gleaning from different topics. I've been watching the work of Chuck Swindoll Jr. And he just came up with a website, naturecreature.net. And he's been explaining the Rosicrucianism doctrine, which is, no, I'm not going to call it a doctrine. It's a philosophy, because it's not a religion. It's an ancient philosophy which breaks down nature and explains nature. He also explained Hermeticism. And these are all philosophies that I like to glean from. And Chuck Swindoll says quite often, don't get locked into one dogma or philosophy, but keep an open mind to things. So yeah, that's my journey. In the meantime, I'd like to experience nature as much as I can. So that was a little bit of anger, of the realm of anger. And tomorrow I'm probably going to get into pride, which is the last of the ego-based fields of consciousness. So, all right. See you tomorrow.